In just a couple of weeks, the American election will be over, and I, for one, will breathe a sigh of relief. I have a very short tolerance limit for the voice of Donald Trump. In fact, it usually lasts about as long as it takes me to hit the mute button on my remote control. The presidential TV debates were something I couldn't bear to watch, and I was extremely dismayed at the last UK election when they were introduced into our own election process. I find it disturbing to hear people deliberately mislead or avoid questions or turn the question round in some way to their advantage. However, I am a fan of Radio 4's Today programme and enjoy listening to the interviews chasing down those who refuse to tell the truth and insisting they give a straight answer. And in our next slide, you will see one of the most famous encounters with a politician. This was in 1997 on Newsnight, when Jeremy Paxman interviewed Michael Howard, who was then Home Secretary. And he asked him the same questions 12 times before he refused to answer. The issue was that the head of the prison service, Derek Lewis, had just been dismissed in rather controversial circumstances. And Robin Day and Jeremy Paxman just asked Michael Howard whether he had or had not threatened to overrule Derek Lewis. But he got no answer, even on the 12th time. Politicians are rather good at sidestepping questions and turning them around so they can avoid a straight answer. Equally, professional questioners such as barristers and journalists are skilled at asking questions with impossible answers. Fraught political situations and tricky questions are not the prerogative of our own generation. And as we heard in our readings today, we have much to learn by reading our Bibles. The art of a highly skilled questioner is to ask the question to which there is no acceptable answer. And the person being questioned finds themselves in a deeper and deeper hole as they wriggle round looking for a way out of the situation. The normal assumption might be that if you ask a question, there is something you want to know. But the professional questioner already knows the answer, and so the question becomes a minefield. The one asking the unanswerable questions holds the power in that situation. And so, as you've just seen a section from our reading this morning, the Pharisees think they've found the perfect question to trap Jesus. Whatever the answer, he will end up in trouble. The question is about paying tax, but they start with some flattery designed to soften up those who are listening. Their egregious creepiness makes my skin crawl, but it is clear they don't mean a word of what they say. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Now, their thinking was that if Jesus says that people should pay their taxes, then all of those who have been so committed to the recent revolt they'd just had against taxes, and these people had transferred their allegiance to Jesus after having been led by a previous messianic figure called Judas. No, it's not that one, not Judas who was the disciple, but another one who tried to lead the people on a great rebellion against tax paying. And when that failed, many of those people had moved across to Jesus, and Judas had garnered a great deal of support and a large following. And the Pharisees were thinking, well, if all these people have now joined Jesus, they're going to be so angry over what they saw of Jesus' betrayal. If he says, pay your taxes, that they will just walk away. Now, personally, I think the fact that the Pharisees even thought that was possible shows how little they understood Jesus and his message, because he wasn't just another rabble-rouser or rebellion leader. He wasn't campaigning about taxes or anything else. There were no promises of riches or social justice on this earth if the people rose up against their oppressors. Jesus was offering love and care and healing to those who'd known precious little of those things in their lives. And as I typed and thought about those words, I found myself remembering the words of an absolutely wonderful poem called Late Fragment by Rained Carver. And that will be on our next slide. He wrote this as he was dying of cancer. And they were the very last words he ever wrote. The last words in his last poem, in his last book. And it's called Late Fragment. He said, and did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so, I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth. And as you can see, these are the words that were then carved on his tombstone. And they're certainly carved into my mind, as even as I thought through what I wanted to say today, they just kept springing into my head. That was what Jesus was offering the people as he walked through the countryside and the towns and villages. He was offering them love, not tax relief. And the Pharisees just didn't get that at all. They thought they couldn't lose, because if he said, pay your taxes, the people would desert him. And if he said, don't pay them, then the civil authorities would arrest him for sedition, and they'd be able to get rid of him that way. In the next slide, just listen to his words again. You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose image is this, and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, so give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Jesus asked for a coin because he was in the temple with his disciples, and no good Jew would carry an image of the Roman emperor into the temple site, which meant that the disciples would have no Roman money with them. You can imagine that after this encounter, the Pharisees went away very angry indeed. Their plan, their skillful questioning, had gone completely wrong, and they were left looking very foolish. But worse still, they had been completely wrong-footed by the idea that they owed something to God. Their anger was beginning to come to a boiling point, and the need to act against Jesus was becoming more and more urgent. Why were they so angry? Why so desperate to catch out this itinerant preacher? I think it's because they couldn't be completely certain that he wasn't right. And when people live with that sort of uncertainty, it can make them do desperate things. It's relatively easy to deal with someone who you know is mad or bad or both. But when there is the slightest chance that they might be right, then doubts creep in. And knowing how to act, how to close down what is happening becomes more difficult. All the other people that had led uprisings at that time had either been delusional or driven to an extent that in the end frightened people. And yet he was a man who didn't seem to want power, and who talked of God as if he had personal knowledge. He was well versed in the scriptures, and he didn't rouse people to fight. Their worry was he could just possibly be the genuine article, and that was scary for those trying to protect their own position. So where is the challenge for us in this story? Well, we should certainly pay our taxes, but that's relatively easy. But Jesus is asking us to do something much harder, and that is to give to God what is his due. And that is not about a few coins or writing checks. It's about giving our whole selves to God, and not just the bit we have labelled as share, our time on a Sunday, or taking part in a church activity. Those things are a good start, but this is a much bigger ask. It's about giving our lives in every possible way, in all that we do and say every single day. So finally, in my last slide, I'm going to use a quote from The Cloud of Unknowing, a book which was written by an anonymous English monk in the 14th century. He wrote about what separates humans from God, and that no one can be forced into relationship with God. It is something which we come to with open hands and a heart full of love, and most importantly, of our own free will. He said that the desire to be God's servant must come from your own will. We are asked to make that decision freely and lovingly. There is no coercion, no threat, no trick questions. It is just up to you.